All right, we're live. Everything's working. It's always a great relief. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. So, we're here today to talk about things that cannot be described in order to conceive of things that can't be conceived so that we can have a peace that transcends understanding. So, as long as we can know that at the beginning, how bad can we do, right? We jump in. So, I want to talk about authentic living today. It's an amazing topic. Actually, has gone some very interesting places in the last few weeks for me, anyway. But it always circles back to some of the same fundamental truths, kind of spoken about in a very different way, to try and elucidate something from a different angle. Not so that we can learn something, but so that maybe we can see something that we haven't perceived before that might just give an indication of something deeper, something of the real, something that is, uh, and you can just stop there, something that is, that has that quality of being that's irrefutable. So that's our endeavor this morning. In talking about authentic living, it kind of has two sides to it. One, what does authentic mean? And two, what is the living part? What is the being part? Which really brings to mind that first question, who are we or what are we? What is showing through in an authentic way? That's our challenge. Interestingly enough, my first search on the web on this topic was into the world of psychology, because authentic living, being real or get real, is part of the pop culture these days, part of trying to find that something real in a society that's increasingly artificial. Everything is a once removed experience, if not twice removed, and sometimes three times removed. It's a strange world. I remember walking down the street on Union Street in San Francisco not too long ago, and seeing a group of young folks walking along the street, 5 or 6 of them, every one of them texting on their phone or looking intently at their phone and not talking to each other at all. And that seems to be the way life is. And now, of course, with the pandemic situation going on, it's emphasizing that even more. And here we are this morning. Normally, we'd be in the same room together and chit-chatting. And today, who knows where we are? We're all around the world now. I noticed in class that we had this last week, we had people from Europe and India sitting in on the Zoom session. So it's quite amazing in a lot of ways. And it really begs the question, what is real? What is authentic? What is being? Carl Jung, that famous psychiatrist doctor, said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And I really enjoyed that statement. It's a good one for meditating. What are we trying to become? What are we hoping to become? And in becoming something, it sort of suggests that you're not that now. So how valid is that even as a framing for what we're trying to do? What we're really trying to do is discover an isness. And that isness includes even our errors about it, that they all exist together in a particular moment as a unity. So it's a wonderful pondering. It really deepens the experience of being to let the mind open to these ideas by letting go of some of the more concrete and traditional ideas that we have. I read an article on being truly present by a Diane Mottel, and she says several things that are quite interesting. She says being authentic means coming from a real place within. Now that's interesting. Coming from a real place within. Now, this is a doctor of psychology talking here, or at least a master's of psychology. So to understand that there is a real place within is our first step. To know that there is something within that's worth touching, or that can be touched, and that it's a place we can come from, meaning it's an emanation, it's a constant expression of something, and it's real, and it's within. It is when our actions and our words are congruent with our beliefs and values. I was quite taken aback when I first read that one, because I thought, I used to start my lecture always with what is one of the three most important things. And one of the three most important things is truth. And we had talked about truth being an inner integrity that involves three things: what you think, what you say, and what you do. That in spiritual life and in trying to develop and understand these higher truths, that's one of the fundamental requirements. You can't move forward beyond the degree that those three inner truths, those three inner states are in alignment: what you think, what you say, and what you do. That integrity has to be in place for you to be able to grow in any way, let alone a spiritual way. And so here she is in her very second sentence in her article on authentic being, on how to be an authentic self. She's touched on some of the deepest Vedantic principles, knowing that the real is inside, that it's in a constant emanation of itself, and that to see it, we have to come to this alignment of our actions, our words, our beliefs, and our values. It is being ourselves, not an imitation of what we think we should be or have been told we should be. There is no should in authentic. That is a wonderful statement too, because we often talk about what we should be. And in being authentic, there are no shoulds. Why? Because we are what we should. That's why. Because every idea of should comes from within us. We are always describing a higher ideal. Then how do we know of a higher ideal if that ideal is not ourselves? I was pondering this morning, like, what do we know about God if we have a concept of God? Where does that come from? And how do we know it? When you were first told the very first thing about God, what could you measure it against to decide whether it was true or not? If you had never read a scripture, or if you had never heard of someone else whom you assumed knew more than you did say something of God to you before, how would you have determined whether it was true or not in yourself? It really points to a possibility that there's a knowing that's innate in us that helps us chisel away at the things we know that are not true in order to arrive at this higher truth. And all of our shoulds point to that process. Oh, I should get up earlier this morning. Oh, I shouldn't have said that to my mother. Oh, I should have been a nicer person to that person. All of these shoulds we know innately. And so this process of living authentically is the process of identifying those things and coming to the ability of letting them emanate from this real place that is within us. Taking the time to reflect on what is important to us, what resonates, what is truly our belief is a step we must all take. Without doing this, we are carrying around baggage that is not our own, baggage that keeps us from finding our authentic self. I like this. She's talking in very common day terms there. This idea that you have to take time to reflect not just on what is important to you, but what is important in life. You have to have that self-nurturing time every day. We don't usually talk in terms of that. We talk in terms of meditation or spiritual practice or spiritual study. How about taking some time to nurture the self, to nurture the emanation, a purer emanation of who you are? Call it your nurturing authenticity hour. To sit down and really reflect. What is the quality of your moment right now? What is your quality of experience right now? What is the quality of how life is going? What has brought you to this moment so far? Take an honest look at how your ideals are working for you. How is your practice working for you? What is the quality of your inner life? Are you even quiet enough to know? Is the idea even constant enough to put a finger on? There's a time every day that's necessary for us to put aside, to reflect on those things, to think deeply about those things, not just to take as long as it takes for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, but to take time beyond that, to let these ideals simmer, to let them percolate, to let them, work all the way down so that inner integrity can form, so that you can become aware of the discrepancies between what you think and what you say and what you do, so that you can let these higher truths soak in, so that their implications are absorbed by your whole self, by your whole being. It's part of our problem. We all hear, one of the first things we hear in the Vedanta truth anyway is Tattvamasi, thou art that. And it's such an easy thing to say and such a delightful idea to have, and certainly an encouraging one. But then we go and do things like make breakfast or talk to somebody else that immediately betrays that notion of thou art that. So we have this inner doubt that forms. We have these inner inalignments, disharmonies that have become normal for us, that have become so normal for us that we're not even aware of it. It's very good to take time to look at the mind, look at your systems of ideas, and try and identify some of these things. This is that baggage that she's talking about. One of the reasons that I've always been a proponent of therapy, of going and seeing a therapist, is not in the sense that you have to be diseased in some way, although many of us are, but the fact that getting an outside perspective from somebody who has studied and somebody who has at least undertaken the idea of mind as a studied object, they can help you find these inner discrepancies. And they don't have to be a therapist. Your friends can do it. Holy Company can do it. That's one of the primary functions of Holy Company, of being around with each other, so that we can get a kind of a counter to what we're thinking and what we're believing and what we're saying about ourselves. One of the big treatments in psychology these days is cognitive behavioral therapy. And after having studied it quite extensively and practiced a lot of it, because it was necessary to undo some of my wrong thinking that I wasn't even aware of, CBT, as they call it, it really is just codified Vedanta in a psychological context. It's going in and looking at statements that you make about the moment that you haven't questioned in years. Ideas that you've formed about who you are that you have not revisited since you were 6 years old, and have become such a normal part of your thinking that you're not even aware of them. Things like black and white thinking, that everything is this way, or I'm always that way, or you never do this, or I always do that. These ideas of saying always and never, and living 100% one direction or the other. And you can see what a psychological problem that is in our culture right now. You go online and everybody is talking about liberals. Everybody's talking about the conservatives. Who are these people that live at those far ends of any of these trajectories? We're all human beings. There's much more in common between us than there are differences. And this is what happens when we don't go about questioning ourselves, when we don't take time to self-reflect, to let things digest and go a little bit deeper than the surface. We begin to polarize, and we become to be extreme and very, very unhealthy in our relationships and in our relatability to the world around us. So taking that time every day to sit there and question your inner beliefs, to question the inner health of your mind, to look at your concepts and reconsider everything always. That is the point of having an open mind. To learn and grow, to test new ideas, to throw out old ones that aren't working or have ceased to work or have played their part, were important within a certain time and context, but aren't anymore. It takes a lot of courage. Why? Because we think these things are ourselves. And when we throw them away, we're afraid of throwing out a part of ourselves. That's why it's important to know that there's this real, authentic self that's behind all of them, that's impossible to throw out, so that we can be fearless, so that we can take a look at these things without attachment, with some sense of objectivity, as much as that can be reached in any way, to consider these things. So that by exposing ourselves, she says, to new ideas, different ways of being, we can discover what resonates within us. We can use all of the changes in this changing world to help us find that unchanging self, to begin to discover this part of us inside that the sages have told us is beautiful beyond words, a self that's inspiring, whose peace is in fact beyond understanding. There's a reason they say that, because it's not of a mind, it's not of a condition, it's a being, it's what we are. She says that part of finding our authentic self is unhooking ourselves from the past. Indeed. By unhooking ourselves from the past, turning off the tape recorder and being grounded in the present. Now, this is a psychiatrist here. This isn't Sri Nisargadatta or Thakur or Ramana Maharshi speaking. It's amazing that even somebody just in the day-to-day world sees these things as truth, that this is the way it is, that we have to unhook ourselves from history, from taking our attachments from the past and projecting them on our present. You know, I've shared that experience one time. I caught my mind making the decision not to like somebody one time. I caught the actual process happening, and it was an amazing moment for me because I saw the truth of the scriptures in that moment. I had met this person several times, and we had had several encounters where we just didn't resonate with each other. We just didn't think the like. We're a little bit offensive to each other. But you know, the first few times it was just, I took each time as it was. I was like, well, I just don't believe that. I don't think that's true. But there came a time when the mind suddenly grabbed all those 5 pieces of history and made a decision. I don't like this person. And when I saw that process happen in my mind, I was very sad, actually. I was very sad. I actually went and sat down for a while in my shrine. And I kind of bemoaned the moment. I thought, mind, why would you ever do that? If I take each moment as new, then everybody has an infinite chance to be my favorite person, as it were. But as soon as my mind holds on to a history and then projects a future by saying, I don't like this person, that means every time from this moment forward that I encounter this person, we start at negative. We start at I don't like. And where can we go from there? So it's important for us to let go of these past notions of things. I don't like that. I don't approve of that. That person is this way. That person is that way. Because no person is this way or that way. All people are. And every moment we should have an infinite chance for change, for redemption in our own life and in our relationships and actions with others. We should always take people as they are in the moment, not hold their past against us. Why? Because that's one of the natures of love, one of the natures of love. It keeps no account of wrongdoing. You know, that's codified in the scriptures. We know that to be a truth. So to reflect on that, to think about that, let go of your baggage. Don't let yesterday determine what today is. You're free in this moment, absolutely free, independent of events. Those things aren't happening at this moment, so why should they affect this moment? Be free in it, she's saying. So part of finding our authentic self is unhooking ourselves from the past, turning off the tape recorder, and being grounded in the present. That's a very important one, this sense of being, because there's a wonder and a beauty to this present that you can't become aware of until you learn how to stop that tape recorder, until you learn how to quiet that mind. That mind makes so much staticky noise you can't hear the beautiful music on the station that's playing within you all the time. You've tuned it out. You've tuned it out. For it is when we are grounded that we can be open, that we can be curious, that we can accept ourselves and accept others. So this grounding in the present, you know, I'm going to come back to that teaching from all the scriptures, that present really is another name of God. This isness, the I am, you know, that this moment is the beloved. This moment is our experience of God. And to be able to see it clearly, to be able to study it, endlessly, really, because this moment never ends and it never begins. It always is. I say that over and over, but it's a marvelous thing to know. It's a phenomenal idea that eternity is. Eternity is not a thing there, over there, or when, or sometime. It is. We experience eternity in the nature of this moment, the fact that we can't define the moment, that we can't catch a snippet of it. And the sooner we realize that, the sooner we'll stop trying. And when we stop trying to catch it and define it, that's when these marvelous qualities come through that she's talking about here. These qualities of openness, these qualities of acceptance, these qualities of kindness and compassion and love, because you're no longer defined by a craggy, crystallized form of almost truth. Because this present is truth in and of itself, and it's beyond comprehension. It's beyond understanding. And that's a very important point to hold on to. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes. So if we truly believe in living an authentic life, she ends her article by saying, then we must continually be learning about ourselves, challenging old beliefs, and sorting through our baggage. Very interestingly enough, I'm reading a book on Buddhism, and he describes practice as just simply being a study of ourselves, that we're trying to touch and know ourselves. This inner real, this inner thing, as it were, that's constantly emanating the energy of love that creates our life. You know, we take that energy of love, that energy of intelligence, the energy of being, and we're creating continuously with it. We've created the life that we are experiencing in this moment. That's all of the recording that we've done that makes us think that way. So let's not get interested so much in what we're creating as in what is creating. What are the qualities, as it were? You know, it's hard as, again, we started off reminding ourselves we're talking about things that cannot be described, conceiving of things that cannot be conceived, and going for a peace that cannot be understood. So all of these words come back to that, which takes the shackles off, which gives us a great immediate freedom always. So we should be continually learning. That's beginner's mind. Remember, we talked about that in the last time. Always seeing things for the first time continually. To have that wonderful openness, that ability to learn and appreciate, to smell a rose 5 times in a row and have it be just as beautiful each iteration. That's what we're trying to allow. It's what we are, but we don't allow that to be. In a second article in Psychology Today, Dr. Stephen Joseph, he says, authentic people are honest with themselves. And that's a hard one to do. I don't know of any argument I've ever had where I didn't think I was right. I don't think that I ever got in a fight with anybody where I didn't think I had the moral high ground. Now, if I maintained that belief, I could be president. But part of growing in our spiritual self, is to be able to be honest with ourselves, to know, wow, that was not what I am. And how do we know that? Again, that's that inner knowledge of God. You know, we don't need religion and scriptures and teachers to tell us what's right and wrong, usually, you know, at least at the fundamental level. Now, after saying that, I have to say there are times when it's appropriate, obviously, if the scriptures and teachers are helpful, because there are situations where we can get into our mind to the extent and get so discombobulated that we can't see up from down, and that we do think wrong things are right. That's why people steal. That's why people murder. That's why all these things happen, because you get into a state where you think that is an acceptable thing to do. Nobody does anything they can't justify. And so when we're justifying, you know, disharmonious, there it is. If we're living in a disharmonious way, then we're in that situation, you know, where we're starting to believe things that are down as being up. And that's when we need a scripture. That's when we need a good friend. That's when we need a good teacher. So that being said, we still inwardly know or have a good compass that will become ever better if we pay attention. That will take us home. That will allow us to live and be authentic. So he says authentic people are honest with themselves. They challenge and question themselves. You know, it's one of my favorite things. I don't know that it's necessarily always a good thing, but in my spiritual practice, I love to take my most cherished ideas and really poke at them, really find out, are they worthy of the amount of love that I give to them? Are they worthy of the amount of security I take in them? To put those ideas up there and really find out what they are. First, identify them, see what they are, and then see if they hold spirit, see if they hold that test of truth inside. That's one of the things I really enjoy about Swami Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna's relationship. That Swamiji never was spoon-fed. He never did. He questioned everything. He went through his atheistic period, even in Ramakrishna's presence. He was an atheist and would say so, and was known as so among the devotees, because he would not take things simply because somebody else said them. He was an honest person. He challenged these ideas. He tested these ideas. And that was his greatness. That is what made his mind, or allowed his mind, to be what it was. Such a huge vista of understanding, such a huge, wide open perspective of isness. You know, every time you read any of the teachings of Swami Vivekananda, even if he's talking about something very particular, you can't help but know that he's looking at this enormous, vast landscape and describing the road, never forgetting the enormity of the landscape. And that's what we're being called to here, even by our doctor right here, Dr. Joseph, in Psychology Today. Be honest with ourselves, challenge and question yourself. Authentic people look for ways in which they are being self-deceptive and try to see things from different angles. Are you brave enough for that? Can you look and see that maybe you've had a wrong idea for a very long time? Maybe even being well known for it, you know? Are you brave enough to go in and see, are you self-deceived? Because at least half of us are self-deceived at all times. Why? Because there's at least as many arguments going on in the world today, and in every one of those arguments, one of the people is really self-deceived. Now, maybe they both are to a degree, but without that self-deception, there wouldn't be that argumentation, you know, that of this notion of having absolute rights, this notion of having infallible positions and opinions. So a person of authenticity doesn't attach to these definitions, doesn't attach to these small adjectives of being. They know that there's something real beyond, that is indescribable, that is incomprehensible, but can sort of be packed into that idea of loving, caring, knowing, and being. And it's that they are attached to, not the notions of being right, not the notions of being great, not the notions of being powerful, not the notions of being beautiful, not the notions of being intelligent, smart, not intelligent, but smart, you know, that they're attached to that deeper sense of self that is emanating everything always, and letting it do it freely without mind and conception and wrong ideation getting in the way of that. He says, he makes another point farther on down in his article. He says, authenticity requires us to be able to overcome our desire to fit in and to be a part of the crowd. Now, that's an important one, and there's two ways to go about this. One is we've all got that desire to be part of the crowd. So Ramakrishna, and actually most spiritual teachers will say you this, the way to take advantage of that is hang out with great people. Find holy company, find people who are emanating what you think is right, and then test it. Does that idea of right hold up? Are they kind? Are they loving? Are they open? Are they respectable and respectful? of those around them? Are they easily angered? Run these tests, and run these tests on yourself. But be independent is what he's making the point here. He's saying don't use that as your measure of success in life. Now that's an easy one, to fall into. I know in growing up in the school system in my day anyway, I have to talk like an old person now. That was a big concern. Being popular, having the right shoes, having the right pair of pants, having the right shirt, the right haircut. That was so vitally important to me when I was a teenager. It was like I didn't have any concept of how expensive that was for my parents, and it didn't matter to me because it was more important than expensive. maybe expensive was part of the point. You know, we shouldn't fall into that kind of thinking. It devalues ourself. It devalues the beautiful story of your life, the valuable contribution that you have to the manifestation of the divine as a whole. So be what you are. Look inside for what makes you beautiful and what makes you valuable. Try and touch that real that comes from within. Try and learn to hear it, to listen to it, to feel it, to experience it in every moment, and open to it. Don't hold on to your old ideas so that you remain craggy and cranky, so that you remain moody up and down here and there. Be free to this steady song of love that's playing deep, 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 deep within, behind the mind, behind the emotions, behind the turmoil of change. Learn to see it and find it. Imagine that it's there. There's a Buddhist writer, Suzuki, who says enlightenment is our natural nature. It's our original nature. That means that being deluded, being confused and being so tossed and turned all the time is not our natural self. It's unnatural to not be to be enlightened, to not be enlightened. Imagine that. Think of a world where we accept that as a truth. It's not natural that I'm not enlightened, because we think that enlightenment is such a rarity. And the Buddhist teacher here says, no, it's not so much a rarity. It's our acknowledgement of it in ourself that is a rarity. If we could acknowledge that there exists within us an enlightened self, how much the manifested self would change, the smaller self. How much the ideas of what we are would change if we would accept that this enlightened self is present and alive within us, and that is normal. That is natural, not what we're focusing on, not where we're living. That's not the natural state. So he says enlightenment is our original nature. We have it before we practice it and before we acknowledge it in terms of consciousness. So in this sense, whatever we do is enlightened activity. If you want to understand it, you cannot understand it. It's not a thing of mind. This enlightened self exists before mind. Now see, our confusion is that we are mind, that we are body, and we can't even imagine, well, if not mind, I've never gone anywhere else for my answers except to mind. I've never gone anywhere else for my pleasure except to mind or body. What is he talking about? This self, this enlightened being, this Buddha mind, as he talks about it in other places. Where is that? What is that? It is yourself, and you cannot see your face. How many times have we said that? We're looking for our face, trying to find our face. You can't find your face the way you find other things, because your eyes are part of that face. We're looking for a unity that's all-inclusive. From what perspective are we going to see an all-inclusive unity? So it's not a perspective, it's a being. And that's why it's an understanding that cannot be understood, why it's a peace that's beyond understanding. Because of that, when we ask what enlightenment is, he says, it vanishes. It vanishes. But when we just do our practice, we have a full understanding of it. That's in that zero place, that place of real calmness and quietness inside. In that place, all is known. Everything is an intuitive that being. The only way to understand enlightenment is just to practice, just to be here as we are. And that means a level of openness that takes a lot of undoing, a lot of practice to attain. And why are we doing this? We're doing this again to find out who we are. How can you be authentic if you don't know what you are? If you don't know what your value is, if you don't know what a real diamond is, how can you tell if a diamond is authentic or not? So if you don't know what a person is, how can you know if that person is authentic? That's an external way of saying if you don't know who you are, what you are, it's one thing to say I'm a boy, or an American, or whatnot. Those are ridiculous things. Those are things that are true to very small numbers of people, not even the people that are all around you. So how can you identify yourself, which is in a oneness with these, with everything around you, as being those things? Certainly, there's something more to it. Khalil Gibran, becoming one of my favorite writers here, actually has a very short story called The Fox. I shared about it, I think it was the day before yesterday, or yesterday maybe, in the vlog. And it's just three sentences, so I'll read it to you. Khalil Gibran, The Fox. A fox looked at his shadow at sunrise and said, I will have a camel for lunch today. And all morning he went about looking for camels. But at noon he saw his shadow again, and he said, a mouse will do. This is one of those stories that on the surface seems ridiculous, but if you start thinking about it, pretty much all of Vedanta is contained in this little story. What is this fox's shadow? That's his ego. What is an ego? An ego is what we think we are when we're ignorant, when we don't know the true inner reality, the true self. We form a surface self, a thing based on things of mind and things of body, because we haven't gone beyond that. And that's our shadow. And at the sunrise, at the beginning of life, our shadows are huge, our egos are huge. We're going to do great things in life. We're going to become great things, and we set out to do and be great things, but never actually ever being in the moment. As long as you're making plans and working for the future, then you're living in the future. You're not living in the present. Your present is only becoming about your future. And that's a terrible place to live, because the future never arrives. And you'll live your whole life, and one day, when that future is not so big anymore, when that shadow is not so big anymore, like what happens with the fox, he comes to realize a mouse would have been enough. I didn't need a camel. And some of us spend our entire life, with this odd definition of self that's based on the senses and on the body, that demands greatness, that demands a constant attention and proof of its existence. It's an insecurity that we carry so deeply within us, all around, all the time, affecting a hunger in us, a constant sense of desire, because we're defining ourselves by something that is not ourself, just like the fox was. He was identifying himself with his shadow. And for us to identify ourselves with mind and body is to identify ourselves with a shadow. And for us to build our day, our quest for life, as it were, for happiness, as it were, for being, as it were, on a completely wrong idea of ourselves, a changing notion of ourselves, is instability. It's never going to get us there. And I always like to take a look at my moment. There's a lot of times where I would get caught up in the accomplishments or the lack of accomplishments in my mind or myself. As a monk, it's very odd, because I look at you come to be an older man. I look at myself at 55 and I think, gosh, I don't own a house. I don't have any savings. I'm not a CEO. I don't really have any responsibilities bigger than mowing a yard. Uh, you can look at that imaginary father in your mind who's like, what have you accomplished? What are you? What have you done? You're nothing. And it's a strange place to be, because it really makes you wonder, wow, because it removes the shadow aspect. My shadow is so small, my the perceived self is so small, so unaccomplished. What is the value in this? And Swamiji says to a man who pointed that out to him one time, The man was being rather belligerent to him and making fun of him being a monk. He said, "What have you accomplished? You're just a beggar." And Swamiji, the one thing he says that I have accomplished is that I can love even you. I can love even you. And so that's the measure there for yourself. How can you love? How deeply can you love? How broadly can you love? How wide are your requirements for love, to give love? Or how narrow are they? That's how you know of accomplishment. It's not a measurement of ownership, a measurement of power, a measurement of authority, a measurement of any of those things, education. That's not what makes a human being. What makes a human being is the breadth and depth of their ability to love, even those who may deserve very little of it seemingly. And the second one he would always follow up with, are you unselfish? Are you not self-consumed? Are you thinking of others? That's the nature of the self. That's this authentic reality within that we're trying to allow to express through a mind that's very confused about what it is and about who it is. Swamiji says in a lecture, Swami Vivekananda said in a lecture back around the late 1800s, a lecture called The Hindu Religion, the Vedas only know the present and neither the future nor the past. But as the present signifies both past and future, right? And all three are only demarcations of time, the present also would be unknown if it were not for something above the senses, something independent of time, which unifies this past, this future, and this present. What is this sense of I that is pervasive? When you were 5 years old, you still said I, but not one cell in your body today is the same as it was when you were 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. Everything has changed. And how about the ideas of your mind? Everything has changed. And yet when you say I, you're still referring to the same thing that you were referring to when you were 4 or 5 years old. What is that thing? What is that unifying self that gives this sense of constancy in the midst of nothing but change? That's what we're interested in. That's the real that will allow us to become authentic to what we are and to who we are. He says, but what is independent? Not our body. It depends upon outward conditions. Not our mind, because the thoughts of which it is composed are caused. It is our soul. The Vedas say the whole world is a mixture of independence and dependence, of freedom and slavery, but through it all shines the soul, independent, immortal, pure, perfect, and holy. All right, there's some words you can use to describe yourself and not be in confusion. Pure, independent, immortal, and holy. That sense of I which has transcended your body, and you know it, but maybe you haven't paid enough attention to understand it, that I is something that is unchanging, that is constant, even when the body and mind have changed 100%, completely, entirely. There's still a sense of I that has not changed, that has grown, or watched a body grow and watched a mind change, but itself has been independent. And it is immortal because it is unchanged by time. It's not affected by your age. It is itself always. It's immortal. So these are not pie in the sky things. These are things that occur to the person who stops and thinks. These are ideas that occur to the person who spends time each day questioning their ideas, questioning their beliefs, questioning their assumptions, poking at their favorite things, and trying to understand who is this I that I am being, and how authentic is my life compared to what that is. Because we want to be authentic, we want to be real. He says that this freedom and slavery cannot perish, as death is but a change. It must be perfect, for imperfection is again but a condition, and therefore dependent. And this immortal and perfect soul must be the same in the highest God as in the humblest man, the difference between them being only in degree, in which the soul manifests itself. Yeah, there is that oneness that's within us. If we learn to identify with it, then we begin to see it in the world around us. We begin to understand it. This idea of dropping off all of these wrong ideas, Eckhart Tolle, in his great book, The Power of Now, he's got quite a paragraph here. He says, a mind full of preconceived ideas. Oh, this is Suzuki. We haven't gotten yet to The Power of Now. This is Suzuki in the book, The Beginner's Mind. He says, a mind full of preconceived ideas, of subjective intentions or habits, is not open to things as they are. All right? If you've got all of these preconceived notions, you're not open to things as they are. It's like me when I decided not to like that person. If I had chosen to stick with that decision, or had that decision happen unconsciously without being aware that the mind had done that, then the next time I would have seen that person, I would have not been able to see them as they are. I would have seen them as I defined them. And that's the importance of poking around at your mind. What have you decided that affects how you see the present moment? Because those things add up and they distort deeply and cause a lot of trouble for us. He says that is why we do spiritual practice, to clear our mind of what is related to something else. All right, yeah. To clear the mind of these false ideations, these ideations based on body-mind, things that change all the time. You know, I remember when I was 8 years old, that we had a dining table that was in the laundry room, oddly enough, and I had to eat a bunch of green beans for dinner. And I wasn't allowed to get up from the table until I did. So what did I do? And if my mother ever watches this, I'm in trouble. I put all of my green beans into the laundry detergent box, one at a time, as we were sitting at the table, so that I wouldn't have to eat them because I couldn't stand green beans. I had decided I did not like green beans. The odd thing is now I'm 55 and I love green beans. What changed? Green beans are still green beans. They're the same. Why did I expend all of that energy not liking green beans? It was arbitrary and random. Your likes and dislikes are arbitrary and random. Get over them. That's what our man Suzuki here is telling you. Throw them away so that you can see the moment as it is, not colored by these wrong ideations of things. Be free from them. To be quite natural to ourselves, which is authentic living, and also to follow what others say or do in the most appropriate way is quite difficult. If we try to adjust ourselves intentionally in some way, it is impossible to be natural. If you try to adjust yourself in a certain way, you will lose yourself. You'll head deeper into delusion. You know, changing and altering ourself means that we're not operating from the self. It means that we don't have a self that's authentic, a self that's real. We're working off of a conjured self, and we're increasing that conjuring as we go. When you do something, if you fix your mind on the activity with some confidence, the quality of your state of mind is the activity itself. Yeah, if you decided you don't like what you're doing, the quality of that act itself is going to be unpleasant because you've decided not to like what you're doing. So if you can manage to undo that disliking and simply come into the moment through acceptance, to not have an aversion or an attraction to it, but to do it with your full self, to manifest some love in it, some beauty in it, it will itself then become a very beautiful activity. It'll become quite lovely. It says, when you are concentrated on the quality of your being, you are prepared for the activity. The quality of your being, immortal, ever free, pure, holy, love, intelligent. If you apply those things to the activity in the moment, that is the way to do it. That's the way to be authentic. That's the way to manifest your inner nature, your inner self, what you really are. That's how you get real in this world. Within this moment, this temporal existence does not change, does not move, and is always independent from other existences. In the next moment, another existence arises, but we may change to something else. Strictly speaking, there is no connection between I, myself yesterday and I, myself in this moment. There's no connection whatsoever if you're identified with that ego self. It's made up. It's made up in the moment. If I ask you who you are right now, and you're like, well, I like green beans. And then I come back in 50 years and you don't like green beans anymore, or vice versa. Who are you? Are you ever changing? Is there no way to identify or know who you are? If that was the case, well, what's the point? But those who have thought about these things, those who have pondered these things, have found out that there is a deeper, much more beautiful understanding, a much more satisfying truth that lies deeper beyond that surface for those who are willing to take the time and the courage and the effort to touch that, to allow that to emanate, to allow that to emanate. When we assume our original nature and incessantly make our effort from that base, we will appreciate the result of our effort moment after moment, day after day, year after year. This is how we should appreciate our life. Those who are attached only to the result of their effort will not have any chance to appreciate it, because the result will never come. You see, because counting on results is a habit. It's a way of experiencing the present moment, and the results are always in the future. So you're always hoping to enjoy the future if you're focusing on the results of what you're doing. And if you live a life focused on the results, which never arrive before your attention is on the next set of results, then you've never actually lived. You've never actually existed. And that is where bliss survives, is in this present moment that you're not seeing because you're focused on results in the next moment. That this moment is merely a throughput to the next one. And that's a tragic life. That's a life of regret. That's a life that leaves you lonely and bitter in old age. That's a life that can never be satisfactory. So the teacher here is saying, be present in this moment. Don't be about results. Don't be about plans. Be about being here. Enjoy what is in front of you by definition. Throw yourself into it by definition. Manifest what you are. Whatever you're doing, manifest love in it. Manifest attention to it. Manifest excellence in it. Manifest pureness in it. Manifest holiness in it. Manifest being in it. And moment by moment, it will accumulate to a life that has no regret, to an old age without resentment, to an old age without bitterness, because you will have learned to live in the moment that you are living in, even as an old man, even as a child, even as a middle-aged woman. That the moment is the thing that is to be worshipped, enjoyed, appreciated, honored, manifested. That it itself has the qualities of God in it. And to be authentic is to manifest that. Now we get to Eckhart Tolle here for the last few minutes. He says some things in such beautiful ways. I always appreciate his writing. He says in The Power of Now, your life situation exists in time. So he's going to make a distinction here. Life situation is going to be one thing. That's going to be ego. That's going to be our perception of the moment. He says, but your life, your living, your life is now. Okay? So he's saying your life situation exists in time, but your life is now. Your life situation is mind stuff. It's a conjuration of mind. Moods, thoughts, happiness, unhappiness. This moment is real. And if you try and define this moment, you've lost it. That's why it requires an openness of constant being. Let that self constantly create, constantly be, but make sure you understand that it's manifesting love, that it's manifesting intelligence, that it's manifesting bliss. Know that, and all will be well in that. Find the narrow gate that leads to life. Right? He's playing towards the Christian ideal here a little bit. It is called the now. The now is the narrow gate. Actually, that gate is so narrow. If you try and determine how wide open it is, That's going to show you how little you know. There's no determining that. It cannot be measured. And that's the wonder of this. That's the joy of it, actually, is to not be able to identify yourself, not to be able to say what you are, to know that you are all things, that you have acted always, that you have thought always, that you can be always, that it's not in the manifestation that you exist, that you are the source of manifestation, is where you are, where that self is, the beauty is. And in that understanding, wow, there's some amazing, amazing living to be done, amazing, amazing seeing to be done. Find that narrow gate that leads to life. It is called the now. Narrow your life down to this moment. Your life situation may be full of problems. Most life situations are. Again, that life situation is your conjured life in mind, what you think of your life, what you imagine of your life. Most life situations are full of problems, but find out if you have any problem at this very moment. Bring just to this moment. Forget the past, forget the future. Be right here. What's the problem? You're here. What's the problem? All right? Live in this moment. Be free. Most life situations are full of problems, but find out if you have any problem in this moment. Not tomorrow or in 10 minutes, but now. Do you have a problem now? When you are full of problems, there is no room for anything new to enter because you're consumed. You're stuck in the solution or thinking caused by problems and troubles. So whenever you can, and he's making the same suggestion as our psychiatrist at the beginning of the talk. So whenever you can, make some room, create some space so that you can find the life underneath your life situation. So that you can find the now that you're using to conjure this world of ideation that has been full of problems, even though the present moment is free of problems. So he says, find that space, make time to investigate this, make time to settle into it, to put all thinking aside and let being arise. That's what he's asking you to do. Use your senses fully. Well, this is interesting. He's not talking about a denial of senses. He's not talking about a repression of ideas. He's saying use your senses fully. Be where you are. Look around. I'm just going to read through this whole paragraph, and please hear every word. This is such a beautiful description of a life well lived that it's just worthy of basking in for just a moment. Use your senses fully. Be where you are. Look around. Just look. Don't interpret. See the light, the shapes, the colors, the textures. Be aware of the silent presence of each thing. Be aware of the space that allows everything to be. Listen to the sounds. Don't judge them. Listen to the silence underneath the sounds. Touch something, anything. Feel and acknowledge its being. Observe the rhythm of your breathing. Feel the air flowing in and out. Feel the life energy inside your body. Allow everything to be, within and without. Allow the isness of all things. Move deeply into the now. You are leaving behind the deadening world of mental abstraction, of time. You are getting out of the insane mind that is draining you of life energy, just as it slowly is poisoning and destroying the earth. You are awakening out of the dream of time into the present. If you can occupy that space, which is your space, which is you, if you can touch that space, that is to know, that is to be, that is authentic. To be free of conjured ideas, to be free of imagined states and moods, to be free of causation and of time, of age, of wealth, of worry, to know that this moment in itself is enough for a lifetime, and in fact is your lifetime. All of your past is indicated here, and from here, all of your future is projected. Everything is here and now. There is nothing else. Everything else is unreal. This moment, as it is divine. It is full of love. It is full of intelligence. It is full of bliss. It's the very expression of God. And Tattvam Asi.